Alright, welcome back to A-Aron Reacts, and we're back for Chapter 3 of Ren. Now, I had a little bit of a break. I'm recording on the same day as Chapters 1 and 2, but I've had a little side deviation, so I'm not as emotionally impacted in Chapter 2 as I was after doing 1 and so forth. So, let's dive right back in. I don't know if I'm ready for it again, though, but let's do it.
My therapist was scowling at my weekly anxiety and depression scores like a detective trying to crack a particularly stubborn case. There were no signs of improvement, and the scores followed no real measurable pattern that were consistent with bipolar. After nearly 2 years of talk therapy and taking enough medications to fill a pharmacy, he sat down with me and he dropped the bombshell that he didn't think that I had bipolar. In fact...
Whoa. I noticed this one's been black and white so far. Not sure why, but, hey.
After nearly 2 years of talk therapy and taking enough medications to fill a pharmacy, he sat down with me and he dropped the bombshell that he didn't think that I had bipolar. In fact, he said that he didn't think that I had depression at all.
Oh.
And it was a very odd thing to be stripped of an identity in an instant. The reality was that a 20-minute in and out consultation 2 years ago led to 2 years of swallowing pills that I never needed and devoting so much of my time to managing the condition that I never actually had. The emotions inside me swirled around like a mismatched soup. On one hand, I was full of anger and I was bitter about the whole situation, but I was also hopeful that this new path could offer me the relief that I desperately needed. He told me he was going to refer me to an ME clinic in Bath. I'd never heard of it before, but in...
ME, medical, mental... I don't know.
He told me he was going to refer me to an ME clinic in Bath. I'd never heard of it before, but instinctively true to character, I started researching it online as soon as I got home. Apparently ME is the medical equivalent of a choose-your-own-adventure book, with tiredness as the only consistent plotline.
Wow.
There were no universally accepted reasons as to why the fuck it existed in the first place. It seemed it was largely accepted to be a post-viral condition, but that was all speculative, because there were no clear consensus in the medical community what ME even was. The defining characteristic was a tiredness that was...
Okay, I found this. I don't know if this is what he's talking about, but I see myalgic encephalomyelitis. Jeez. Chronic fatigue syndrome. Here's a different one. Yeah, chronic fatigue syndrome. So it looks like that's what it is. I think it is. We're going to run with that.
What ME even was. The defining characteristic was a tiredness.
Okay, so tiredness, yeah.
I could relate to this. In fact, I could more than relate to it. For anyone lucky enough to have not have experienced this, if you want an idea of what it's like, force yourself to stay awake for 3 nights in a row. During this time, eat the food that makes you feel terrible, and in this sleep-deprived state, exercise until your muscles give out.
Oh my.
By the 3rd day, you'll have a small insight into living with this condition.
Geez.
During the years post-stem cell transplant, where I recovered a lot of my health and functionality, I remember getting COVID and thinking it was a walk in the park compared to the first year of my illness. The difference was COVID lasted about a week. The thick of my illness lasted 8 years, and the illness was getting worse. I pinned a lot of hope on going to that first visit at the ME clinic. It was a 6-month waiting list, God bless NHS wait times, but I felt excited to be surrounded by people who would understand me, where I could climb out of this nightmare. But my hopes were pretty quickly crushed during that first visit. I remember walking into a space that looked like a disused classroom where a bunch of people on chairs were sitting around in circles like Alcoholics Anonymous. I could feel a sense of camaraderie and that we all felt like dog shit. We were all confused and we were all desperately wanting to feel better. I believe at the time I was probably the youngest in the group. The group leader waddled in and handed us all a booklet that looked like a school timetable. She then sat us down and told about this new revolutionary technique called pacing, where you write down and track everything that you do in a day, and then you do it less. And then with time, do it more again. The theory being that you have a limited bucket of energy compared to normal people, and you need to protect that and gradually push it. I thought this sounded pretty stupid, so I raised my hand. I told her about the pain in my body. I told her that my muscles twitched constantly. I told her that my bones ached. I told her that my mouth was dry. I couldn't focus. That some days they'd be without mercy and I'd be trapped in bed for the whole day. But the days that I wasn't, I wanted to make the most of it. I wanted to breathe the air and I wanted to live. She told me she understood it's hard, but she didn't really offer more than that. She just pointed at the booklet and told me to follow it. I asked her about things like heavy metal poisoning, about chronically reactivating viruses, about defective mitochondria, about all the things that I read that were linked to chronic fatigue, but she just raised an eyebrow, looked at me like I was a hypochondriac and told me she knew nothing about those things. I remember walking out of the building feeling disheartened and defeated, so much so that my legs buckled as I was walking home. I began to sob uncontrollably on the side of the road. An old woman knelt down to comfort me and asked me what was wrong. I didn't even really know how to explain, so I just told her that I missed my friend. Despite my skepticism, I stuck to the program for at least half a year, and I kept going for my periodic visits to the clinic, and it did jack shit. In fact, I got worse. I was always getting worse. One thing that particularly struck me about the ME support groups was the pure desperation and confusion. With most other conditions, you're given a diagnosis, a prognosis of whether it's going to kill you, and what you can do to manage it or cure it. With ME, you don't get that. You get an indeterminately long sentence to purgatory. You feel worse than you've ever felt in your whole life, and you're given no explanation as to why, and no signpost pointing the way.
It's interesting that some of these scenes, like this one, for example, is the color. Right? He's black and white, and then, he's painting a vivid picture with some of these scenes.
Out. Life, and you're given an indeterminately long sentence to purgatory. You feel worse than you've ever felt in your whole life, and you're given no explanation as to why, and no signpost pointing the way out. There was no selection bias to the people suffering. Members of the group were anything from esteemed ex-lawyers to single parents to former athletes. One thing I can say,
no selection bias, meaning anybody could become victim to it, right? There's no bias in who it chooses. That's tough.
Lawyers to single parents to former athletes. One thing I can say, these people were for the most part all extremely driven and collectively mourning their old lives. There's a stigma that because ME's predominant presentation of symptoms is tiredness, that its victims are just being lazy. I can tell you firsthand that me and every single person I've met with genuine ME would rather run 1,000 marathons than have to live another week with the tiredness and the unrelenting fatigue. We were at war with our tiredness, trying desperately to escape it, and some of us would go to extreme lengths to turn ourselves into guinea pigs to try and find ways out. Suicide was pretty common in those online support groups. It was around this time I was swallowed into the music industry. I was out busking on the streets one day and I noticed this sketchy, good-looking...
Swallowed in, right? It enveloped him as opposed to the other way around. So he approaches it as in not a good way. And, he's talked in some cases at length, and others he's hinted at just, the greed and, selling out in the music industry and things to that effect. So I'm guessing the way that he's talking about this, it's all related, but I don't know that I know the full story tied to that, or if there is one really.
Pretty common in those online support groups. It was around this time I was swallowed into the music industry. I was out busking on the streets one day and I noticed this sketchy, good-looking Mauritian guy with his arms crossed watching me. Really?
Okay, now I feel like a dummy. I really do. What is Mauritian? Mauritian. Oh, from Mauritius. Okay. Interest. I can ignorantly say I know nothing about the country. Okay. I really do feel ignorant. Okay. I don't know how else to say it. I could try to disguise it or dress it up, but the truth is I'm ignorant.
Streets one day and I noticed this sketchy, good-looking Mauritian guy with his arms crossed watching me really intensely, as though he was studying every lyric coming out of my mouth. He approached me and asked me if the songs I was singing were mine. I said they were. A big smile was painted across his face, and he told me he just finished recording Plan B's latest record, which turned out to be The Defamation of Strickland Banks, one of my favourite albums of all time.
Wow.
He was looking for a new project to sink his teeth into, and he asked me if I'd come to London to record. We got into it. The whole time I felt dreadful, but this was a lifelong dream materialising in front of my eyes. So bit by bit, when I could, I get
the... So bit by bit. Right? Chalk outlines.
But little by little, bit by bit.
Right? Bit by bit.
To London to record. We got into it. The whole time I felt dreadful, but this was a lifelong dream materialising in front of my eyes. So bit by bit, when I could, I get the train to London and start chipping away at my first ever album. I didn't really let on how I was feeling during this time because I didn't want to sabotage it. There would be times I'd finish up in the vocal booth after doing the take, excuse myself to go to the toilet, throw up from the dizziness I was experiencing, sometimes with specks of blood, and then I'd go back and pretend that nothing had happened. I'd be sitting around with the whole room spinning and would pretend I was...
Okay, and he talked about this, gosh, I'm blanking on what, but he talked about, you know, I remember commenting about how it was making him sicker. Yeah, I just don't remember what. It's all starting to blend together. Happened.
I'd be sitting around with the whole room spinning and would pretend I was fine. There was only so long that I was able to keep this up. Eric told me it'd be a cool idea for me to start going to industry showcases and start building buzz. Performing live like this was a whole new level of taxing that I wasn't ready for, but I was so ferociously ambitious that I just ploughed through. The usual way it would go is I'd be in the back of Charlie's car, the whole world would be spinning, I'd be trying my best to sleep in it all day, parked up outside of whatever venue or pub it was in London, trying to conserve energy for the show.
Jeez, my goodness.
Sometimes...
That's just not fair. And he still does it. That's determination, that's dedication, that's perseverance, that is freaking superstar right there. I mean, there's no wonder this guy's who he is. I mean, Ren, amazing.
For the show. Sometimes I'd cry a little before I performed. My whole body would be burning. Then I'd brush it off and I'd get on stage and I'd perform as best I could. People would come up to me at the end, pat me on the back. I'd smile and pretend to be charismatic. Then I'd get back in the car and I wish I was in bed and have to endure a 3-hour drive back to Bath from London.
Jeez.
There was only a few shows where I could keep pretending. I'd usually be trying to disguise the fact that my body was trembling through the fatigue and pain. Eventually I started crying mid-set. It became blindingly obvious to everyone working with me during that time that something was very wrong. I told Eric that I needed to take some time out. My plan was to live at home with my mum for a month maximum, get my energy back, and come and finish the record. That 1 month turned into 2 months, turned into 3 months, turned into 6 months. I pushed myself to total burnout. The distance led to me and that angel breaking up, in part because it was difficult to navigate a relationship when you have so much brain fog, and I didn't know what it was well enough to be able to explain it to her at the time. With a loud thud, I'd been jolted out of a Shakespearean storyline, I lost the record deal, and I couldn't get out of bed. My friends from Trick the Fox never really...
Okay, I remember him talking something about losing a record deal, or somebody in the comments talking about, or something to that effect, but I never heard that from him. I don't know. I think I just heard it from a comment. I don't think I heard it from him before.
I lost the record deal, and I couldn't get out of bed. My friends from Trick the Fox never really called to check up on me. It felt like the whole world was moving at lightning speed without me. I had this amazing opportunity right in front of me, and I was chained to the floor. I was alone. I was sick. I wished that my condition would get it over with and kill me, but it wouldn't, and it felt cruel that it wouldn't. It just let me rot in bed. The whole world would continue to turn, and I would rot. In the next episode, I'm going to tell you about a fight with a television and losing my anal virginity to an 80-year-old man. Stay tuned for that.
Wow. I'm assuming that's metaphorical, getting fucked in the ass, right? So...
Patterns are composed by a time bomb for an author, like pigs to the slaughter. A symphony of self-doubt sings out, breath starts getting shorter, running water. It's the state that I wish to become. Instead, concrete envelops my movement and I'm rendered deaf and dumb.
So this is just truly embodying all of what he just said, right? Running water is the state I wish to become. It's fluid, it's motion. It changes, it shapes, it's life. Right? Water is life, but instead I'm concrete, I'm frozen, I'm stuck, I'm immovable, I'm heavy, I'm thick.
To become. Instead, concrete envelops my movement and I'm rendered deaf and dumb, unable to heed the advice of others. Don't tell me things will get better, cause so far things haven't gotten better. I've got the sweater, poster child, bipolar, ADHD, therapist, wet dream. I don't wanna talk about my father, I don't wanna talk about my dead friend, I don't wanna talk about myself. I'm sick of talking about myself. I'm sick of talking about myself and realizing that talking about myself never ever helps. Still, I call for help, cause I really want help. But the pills didn't seem to help, and the therapist didn't.
So, just I want to talk musically about what's happened. We see the bass and the guitar just same beat, essentially. Doom, 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 doom. Right? And then occasionally you've got kind of these, like we just heard one with the piano, it was like, ring, like that type of, arpeggiation all in one motion. And you hear miscellaneous things going on with it. I don't remember all of it, but, there's here and there a couple things to fill the void. That changes it up. It adds variety. It adds a little bit of color to it, just to show that, amidst all of that steady, pulse that is dragging him down in the agony, there's these glimpses of hope. There's these glimpses of, oh, it's not that diagnosis, it's this. Things are changing up. But no, it's back to the same old muddy concrete. And still I call for help.
From realizing that talking about myself never ever helps. Still, I call for help. Cause I really want help.
In that case, it's just
but the pills didn't seem to help. And the therapist...
That's an example. It's like an arpeggiation from the piano. Ding, ding, ding.
And realizing that talking about myself never ever helps. Still, I call for help. Cause I really want help.
If you listen to piano here.
But the pills didn't seem to help. And the therapist didn't seem to help. But still, I want help. I've danced with the devil in hell.
Now guitar.
I've sat in a prisonless cell. And here I always dwell.
But that bass just keeps thumping. That's his heartbeat. He's still alive. That's it. There's not much more to the song behind it. He's embodying the fact that he's just imprisoned in himself, as he says here.
How I've sat in a prisonless cell, and here I always dwell, in this prison in myself. I do this thing where my mind travels back to the golden age. You know those times where you were carefree and everything was golden? The golden age. You know those times where everything was golden, where you were carefree and everything was golden?
He's repeating
the hardest thing I ever had to do was come to terms with the fact that time never really existed. I've always felt so fucking detached and broken, bruised and mismatched. Find it hard to relax, living under the cracks. Tried to fill in the gaps, lying here on my back. Still, I can't find it. Sense of peace in my mind decline. Pulse increase and my sweat combines with a feeling so deep I fall inside it. Depression, I hate you, depression. Your constant oppression, respond with aggression. They say depression brings you lessons. Constant stressing conceals blessings. You will grow in broken settings. Fuck those lessons, fuck depression. I've been living in your shadow for so long that I forgot how I can shine. How I can find a refuge in my mind. How am I meant to sit here and unwind? The planets align. I feel like I'm cursed. Feel like I'm cursed to just be here to hurt. Feel like I'm cursed to just be here to bleed. But my demons been feeling this way since birth. Depression, I hate you. 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 Depression, I hate you.
If that's not painting emotion through music, I just don't know what is. He gives it all. As we just heard from him, to the point to where he can't stand up, to where he's passing out, where he's crying. This just paints so much more of the picture. Like, I had no idea that he had this era where just in order to follow something that he thought was, the music sucked him in, that it was draining him even more, that he traveled 3 hours to go perform at Bath, and, just could barely stay awake while he's again being misdiagnosed, only to perform and ultimately have that drive back where he just wants to die, and, basically takes time off, and ultimately, they don't even follow up with check on him. And I hate depression. Oh my gosh. And then the way he portrays the music change-ups and everything here towards the end. Once again, I mean, I feel like I'm always using the term brilliant with Ren, but I can't think of a better term. I just can't. I think I will add, though, and I said this in a previous chapter, but just certainly applies here, is just vulnerability. Just the amount of vulnerability he just gives all of himself here. It's unreal. All right, I think that's it for this one. Thank you all. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, please go ahead and do so now, and consider joining us over at a-aronreacts.com/Ren, and we will see you in the next one. Thank you much.